complete and
Okay, so we are recording. A formal welcome to panelists and guests. This is the third Wunderbar Together discussion panel in a series of 5, brought to you by the Auslandsgesellschaft in Dortmund. My name is Dan Scanlon, co-moderator with Gerald Baas from Dortmund, Germany. Welcome. Just to a note to the American guests, if you could maybe keep your speed in check, and for our German guests, that would be great. Gerald, I'll introduce the American panelists and hand it over to you. Is that good?
oh, fine.
Okay, so we have Dr. Professor Gutowski, climate scientist and of course professor at Iowa State University, specializing in regional climates. We also have Dr. Medeiros, senior environmental planner for the Northern Virginia Regional Commission.
And we in Dortmund have Michael Leichner. He is the head of the Department for Climate Protection in the city of Dortmund. And we have Marlon Philipp. He is one of the activists of the Fridays for Future movement, which has changed a lot during the last years in consciousness and also in political activities worldwide. Welcome to all of you. I think we should start then now with a short round of the panelists, very short, just shortly describing what their kind of work and their attitude and approaches to our theme today, and then we come to the topics themselves.
Perfect. Dr. Medeiros, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you very, very much for giving me the privilege to be part of this among so many really important special people. My name is Dale Medeiros. I'm a planner for Regional Council of Governments representing the 14 cities, counties, and towns of Northern Virginia, the suburbs just across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. And my board of 25 is comprised of the mayors, the county commissioners, the council members of those 13 local governments. And I'm part of the secretariat. I have an umbrella portfolio that works with sustainability issues, climate resiliency, climate mitigation, but also a very unique special international program, which is relevant for this conversation. And the way we work internationally is special. It's unique, although I wish it was more the norm rather than the exception. And it's specifically to take climate resiliency, climate mitigation, policy and technical innovations from cities like Dortmund or Bottrop or Stuttgart and Hamburg and apply them to the benefit of our communities. So when we work with German cities and towns or innovations, there has to be an output or an outcome environmentally, socially, or economically through our collaboration. And second, we prioritize the countries with which we work, like Germany, based on economic interconnectedness. So we don't work with countries like Russia or China or Brazil, because countries like Germany offer us not only innovations on climate and sustainability, but they're also invested in our region in the form of companies like VW, Lidl, Rehau, Lufthansa. And then third, because we're a small agency and we are dealing with renewable energy, micro cogeneration, green designs for data centers, you have to involve the technical and the policy experts from our region's science, academic research institutions. So we work with Virginia Tech University, George Mason University, to help us create a new conversation in the transatlantic context, which is cross-national science and technology. It's not necessarily basic, which is where most of the collaboration has taken place, but in the realm of the applied, and then on top of that, in support of local sustainability. So taking innovations about nitrate extraction technologies from cities like Innsbruck, Austria, and applying them to help Alexander Renew advance its own wastewater treatment systems so that they're economically performing as well as environmentally. So that's sort of a snapshot of how we work. Thanks for inviting me, and I really look forward to being part of this conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Medeiros. Dr. Gutowski, now I just want to point out, I said Gutowski earlier because that W in German is pronounced like an F. So tell us a little bit about your work, your interests, your research.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Dan. Yes, I'm used to pronouncing it Gutowski, but I've had Polish relatives who tell me no, it should be Gutowski. So you're doing the correct pronunciation. But yes, my background, I'm basically a climate scientist, originally getting a PhD in meteorology. And so over the years, I've done a lot of work evaluating climate models, asking questions like how well are the climate models working? What do they tell us about future climate? And as time has gone on, I've tended to focus more and more on extreme events in climate models, which necessarily has brought me down to thinking much more about regional climate and what goes on with climate change in regions. And then even beyond that, in more recent years, I've started to get more and more engaged with broader community groups, which you might call stakeholders, the people outside the climate community who need that information. And so people like Dale would probably find things that we are doing to be of relevance. Very interesting approach you folks are taking, Dale, by the way. And so that has meant that I've had to learn a lot about how you properly engage with people in the community. You don't just throw a pile of data at them, which of course we get nowhere. I've also been involved with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the World Climate Research Program. I was one of the lead authors for the latest IPCC report that came out 2 or 3 weeks ago that got a lot of attention. And so over the years, I've had a very strong and very gratifying, very educational experience of interacting with scientists from around the world. And it's just been really great to learn how to interact together, to work together, and really exchange ideas about climate and climate change.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Professor Gutowski just mentioned extreme weather or climate events. And I think Michael Leischner can give us a recent example of it. He is the head of the department for climate protection, environmental protection in the city of Dortmund. Mr. Leischner. Hello?
You've got to turn on your microphone.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm happy to be part of this talk. And yes, my name is Michael Leischner, and I'm the head, as said, of Department of Climate Protection, Adaptation, also of air quality, and also of noise reduction. And this fits very much together because if I do something for better air quality, and if I do something for a noise reduction, it also pays normally into the greenhouse gas emission reduction. Sorry for my not so good English, so I must look a little bit on my paper sheets, because of all this, because we are not used the English every day, just in events like this. So sorry about this. Okay, and what we are doing, or what we had done now, is a new integrated action program for climate protection until 2030. We had an old one until 2020 with a target 40% carbon emissions reduction until 2020. We haven't reached it. 7% are not reached. But now the new one is on 2030. To reach 20, it's also the government goal to reach 55% until 2030, and to be climate neutral at 2050. But in May 21, the German government tightened the national targets for climate protection in its Climate Protection Act. And this was decided by the judgment of the Constitutional Court, sought by members of the Fridays for Future movement. So I'm very happy that we have that Fridays for Future is part of this discussion now. And the climate protection or the climate neutrality is to be now achieved at 2045 from the government side, so that the interim targets also have been adjusted in the communities. So normally by 2030, 65% already instead of 55%, and also or compared to the level of 1990. So our new climate action program has 5 fields of action. And so for the first time, and this is a novum in Germany, we put healthy air quality because it correlates, as I had said, closely with greenhouse gas savings. We also, for the first time, it's also a novum for Germany, we put in agricultural and food, because this does not pay for the carbon emission balance from the community, but it's a global thing, you know. So because if you work on this also as a community, you can save a lot of carbon emissions for the global carbon emissions balance. Also the field of sustainable buildings, also the field of renewable energies. We have a lot of measures for these fields, and also, of course, the sustainable mobility, because in the mobility, the last 20 years, there were no savings in carbon emissions or in greenhouse gases. And on the other hand, we have a master plan for integrated climate adaptation things, because Dortmund is also massively affected by climate change, and not only Dortmund. Germany has been massively affected by climate change about 2003 with a big heat wave, which cost the life of about 30,000 people, and the material damage in the new catastrophic now in the area of the Ahr Valley is very, very high. So
the flooding,
yeah. The flooding. So Germany is one of the 10 countries with the highest material damage in the world. So, but for the first time, we had also loss of lives, and this was more than 130 loss of human life, and about 5 people injured at this catastrophic in the Ahrtal. And Dortmund, in the south of Dortmund, was also a little bit affected with this, but with this flood. But massive damages in Dortmund were averted because we have a new Lake Phoenix. It's a recreational lake on an old steel factory place, you know, and there is a lot of water retention base in this one. And this lake is very new. It's about 15 years old, and that was the luck of Dortmund, that there is a 360,000 cubic meters of retention, water retention possibility. So that's the thing at the moment with these 2 master plans for climate climate air, this climate air action program, and the master plan for climate adaptation. We are on the start now. Okay.
Yeah, I think Fridays for Future, you mentioned already, made some fire in this process to speed it up, and with the court decision, the politicians were forced to work faster on climate protection. Therefore, I'm very glad to welcome Marlon Philipp from the Fridays for Future movement in Dortmund. Mr. Philipp, please, your turn now.
Yeah, hello. Also, excuse my English if it's not good enough. It's a bit rusted nowadays, but I usually try my best. Anyways, yeah, I'm from Fridays for Future Dortmund. I'm not the founder, but I've been part of the local group for about, I don't know, since the beginning, kind of from the second week onwards. And so I had like the whole window to see how the movement in Dortmund developed. But do mind, I never took part of the national level. So I usually stayed in my local area in Dortmund. And we created this movement here in Dortmund and had some bigger successes. We were able to increase the number of demonstrants from 3,000 to 6,000 to 12,000, which is quite a lot for Dortmund.
Locally, yeah.
Locally in Dortmund, yes.
Yeah,
which
and
is a
that
city.
happened worldwide too, huh?
Yeah, of course, yeah. This is why I usually try to just explain the side of Dortmund, because this is where at least I participated. But yeah, it is like a international movement, but it is the biggest in Germany, I think. And as said before, we try to bring politics and civil movements together, because usually politicians say, there's like no real need, so I'm not changing anything for sustainability. And the people are complaining that nothing is done by the governments. So we create the demand in a way and control the politicians in some way. Yeah, that's what we basically do. I'm also doing this kind of as a job as well. I'm working for the Technology Studies group at the university and research on sustainable transport. So I'm also kind of from the field. And yeah, currently we're preparing the next international big demonstration, which is on the 24th of September. Oh, yeah, 24th, I think. And yeah, this is why we're also quite busy right now.
Shortly before the elections in Germany, 2 days before, I have read an article of Dale Medeiros, and he wrote something which is also an international problem. In America, a majority of the people has declared that international cooperation in the fight, for instance, against COVID-19 or the climate change is very important, but on a local level, they are very reluctant because of concerns, economic concerns, social concerns. And I guess that's a problem worldwide. Maybe Dr. Medeiros can explain a little bit more from the American point of view. He said the American cities lag far behind many other cities to the world, but I can imagine still about 100 countries in the world where it is similar.
Thank you very much for the chance to sort of explain what we were trying to communicate. There's lots and lots of attention, especially in the context of climate change, about getting cities involved in climate mitigation or climate resiliency initiatives. And in the same context, getting involved globally. And what I was trying to communicate was the need now more than ever for strategic engagement, especially by Americans, to get engaged globally. In other words, the problem typically in the past, and in many respects still is that international work at the local level is seen as marginal. It's disparaged as being boutique or even wasteful. And what I was trying to say is that as cities become more engaged globally, the old model of event-based sort of interaction without results or outcomes that is not put into a strategic plan is outmoded. It's not going to carry the day. And there's a special reason, especially in an American context for that, which is that there's this phenomenon of exceptionalism. We think that we're better basically than everybody else. And that has handicapped our abilities to put global engagement at the local level into a strategic context, and in particular, learning. In other words, fora like this where local governments will talk have typically given the local American an opportunity to talk about what they're doing in Dallas or in Seattle and a counterpart from Copenhagen or Stockholm. It's great, and so they'll share lots of activities. I think we need to move beyond that and be able to say how conversations like this translate into action. So putting it into a local context of Dortmund, we've worked a lot actually over the years with learning how green infrastructure, on-site stormwater management could be taken from the International Building Exhibition, Hampshire Park projects, many of which were in Dortmund, and applied them to watershed restoration schemes, or taken green rooftops from the schools and the government buildings of the Ruhr and applied them to our high schools or to our own government buildings. Taken concepts like on-site stormwater management, bioswales, which retain water, allow the soil to regenerate, but also cool our cities. We want to continue the process of learning from and applying those lessons. And so what I was getting at in those articles was the need for us at the local level in the United States for strategic outcome engagement. When especially we work with German counterparts, and we work with Germany specifically because you have so much to offer. You have a rich tradition of renewable energy, many national, local policies on climate mitigation, green infrastructure, urban forestry, recycling. And we want to find ways to take those innovations and apply them at the local level. We want to bring our university partners into the conversations so that we have that brain trust, that talent, the science and the technical talent to tap into and help us bridge any technical information policy gaps. Translating innovations from German cities is not easy as add water and stir. A lot of complex policy, regulatory, science, technical barriers that slow the application process. And we want to work with our businesses, our civil society actors, our NGOs to help us learn from the experiences of cities like Dortmund. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, does everybody agree that the national or international benchmarks on climate protection are printed on paper, but the real efforts have to be done on a local level?
Dr. Gutowski, would you comment on that? And also, would you maybe build on that context, that American context, as it references post-assessment, post-climate assessment? Unmute.
Sorry, yes. No, I mean, I certainly agree with Dale that, you know, there is sometimes a certain lack of humility in the United States. And I think that, you know, one thing that I've learned as a scientist collaborating with people around the world is there's so much you can learn from other places. I think hearing Dale talk, it's made me realize that, yes, in my academic town, lots of us interact with people in other places, but then the question is, how does that translate into local action? And not just in our own town, our university town, but even beyond that. And that really is a big challenge that I hadn't really thought about quite so clearly before, but I've certainly learned a lot myself, especially through this organization called the World Climate Research Program, which operates under the World Meteorological Organization. I've learned a lot about regional climate, how people can simulate it, understand our models with people around the world, and what we learned about the science. But then there's this question of how that gets translated into actual action on the ground. And that's where I think the climate research community has really had a lot to learn over many years now about how you actually translate that information into something that's usable. And I think in the United States, as Dale has alluded to, there's been times when there's been resistance to that. People think that, oh, I don't want to make changes that might cost money or something like that. And so it's been a bit difficult sometimes to get people to understand that there are real changes occurring. I even saw just recently, I was interviewed after the IPCC report came out by a local TV station. They posted that interview on YouTube, and then it was interesting to see the comments below it. There's still, maybe not a lot of people, but there's still people who think that we're just spouting garbage. There still is a challenge trying to get people to understand that there's a lot that we need to learn, and there's a lot we certainly can learn from other people around the world. That's very important. And part of the issue here is language. I appreciate that I can talk in my native language. Ich spreche Deutsch nicht. So, but that's also something, and I think that's also part of where sometimes Americans lack humility, in that we just expect that everybody's going to talk in our language. And it is a common language around the world, but nonetheless, we have to understand what that means for other people trying to communicate with us as well. So again, another aspect of humility that I think is needed.
I have learned that Dortmund is a kind of model in America, at least what Dale has said. But I'm not sure if Marlon Philip does see it the same way. And maybe we still all have thinking of the dolce far niente, the sweet doing nothing. That's also an Italian expression. Yeah. Philip, Marlon Philip, please.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it, that Germany is known internationally for its efficiency, but basically it's just like a big bureaucracy, and there's not so much efficiency left after all of that. No, there's like a lot to do in Dortmund still. It's like a really car-centric city for German terms. Obviously, it's not like Münster, which is a student nearby, which is basically the most bicycle-friendly city, but there's like lots to do.
Oops. You are frozen. Hello. Marlon, Philip?
Everybody else is okay? Yeah.
Everybody else seems to be okay, but Marlon Philip seems to be frozen, the picture and the voice. Maybe Mr. Leichner can continue, because
yes,
He's back.
Sorry, there was like a short disconnect for something. Yeah, I die, okay. And then
please then continue first, Mr. Philip.
Yeah, no, like traffic for cyclists is horrible here in Dortmund, and like in a lot of parts in Germany. That's based infrastructure, like cycling lanes and so on, and also the missing awareness of car drivers often. So that's just like one example, which should be, in my mind, kind of easy to improve. Like we have like lots of 3-ways driving lanes. You could just like use one for bicycles and other non-car travelers. I know it's not that easy in practice, but I think to really show the willingness to change, you just sometimes have to try something out in city context.
Yeah, now it's the possibility for Mr. Leichner to respond and say why doesn't it has happened yet?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Marlon is right. Dortmund is a city with a lot of individual mobility by cars, of course, but this is based in the history of Dortmund. After the Second World War, Dortmund was erased, it was bombed, and there was really nothing left. 95% was damaged. And so after the Second World War, the town of Dortmund, the city of Dortmund was built up like many towns in Germany for cars, big lanes, four lanes, big roads, 4 lanes everywhere, big roads coming into the city and going out of the city. So now, of course, it's very difficult, or it's for a long time now very difficult to change this in the mind of the people, that we have to change this,
But sorry, Mr. Leichner, may I interrupt shortly? New York City has also big avenues, and they have just taken 1 lane of each avenue for the bicycles now.
I just wanted to explain the history, and but now we have a big program. It's called Master Plan Mobility Change, and the target of this change is to split the use of mobility it means bicycle, individual cars, and open öffentliche Verkehrsmittel, public transport, and walking. In 4 parts, 25% for each, you know. So that is the target now, and there we have a big master plan of sustainable mobility, and this is part now of this action program 2030, and this master plan of mobility has 5 special plans, you know, and all these plans. Dortmund is the capital of master plans, because we are making master plans to involve the society, the civil society. And 50% of the money for this master plan goes in workshops and to let participate the civil society of the city of Dortmund, and to involve them in these master plans, that at the end, this master plan is not in the board, so that we can transform this master plan on the road. You know, that is very important, and that's why we are doing this now. And we hope that in 2030, when all the measures of this master plan are done, that then we have these 4 parts, 25% for each in the city of Dortmund. But what I wanted to say, because before you talked about this international action for people, or for international action in terms of climate mitigation and adaptation with other countries. Dortmund, since 10 years, Dortmund is doing very much in terms of being international, involved in other or networking internationally. So there is, for example, one network. It's called Urban Transition Alliance, and our twin city, Buffalo, is within this. Pittsburgh is within this from America. Then also cities in China. Many cities which have this structural change after coal mining or heavy industry, so are coming together in this network and talking in special fields about structural change in terms of climate mitigation and adaptation. So we are really involved in these things, and also cities from US are involved in this, and yeah, we are doing a lot internationally. So that's why many people ask if we can be part in networks like this one, you know. Okay.
Any further comment on that?
It's quite important.
Yeah,
sorry.
Marlon.
It's important to not only have master plans, but also to successfully finish them.
Yeah.
Like I just don't want to go to too much politics in Dortmund or like structural things. But for example, we have like a bicycle highway, the Ruhrradschnellweg 1, which was supposed to be finished by 2025. Now it will be only done by 2030. And this kind of mindset to just do it like this slowly without like some real labs or like real experiments of new sustainable ways in what form ever, or in whatever form, is what I'm kind of lacking. What I think is kind of lacking in Germany, and also obviously in Dortmund as well.
Can I just answer? Can I just answer?
Yeah, please. Yes.
Okay. Let me just say, Fridays for Future is a blessing for the city of Dortmund, because the administration can only do what the city council is decided. You know, if the city council says, come on, make the change of mobility, then we are doing the change of mobility. But we can only do it like the city council give us the range to do, you know. But through the demonstrations of the Fridays for Future, the pressure on the politics is very high now, very high. It's the best time for us to make plans and to make measures and to implement these measures. You know, we never before had a better time for climate protection measures and climate adaptation measures. So really, it's a blessing that Fridays for Future is on the run and makes the pressure to the politicians, and that's what we need as an administration.
That is a gold medal for Fridays for Future. Yeah. But maybe we can now turn in the second round and discuss a little bit what
Gerard, Dr. Gutowski had some input also.
Okay, sorry.
Yep, sorry. Yeah, well, one quick comment. Marlon, I think what you're doing is great. Actions by groups like you get attention in the United States. Greta Thunberg has visited my home state here as well. That is critically important. My question, both to you and to Michael, is what type of climate information do you work with? As someone who produces and evaluates climate information, it's really useful for me to hear what people like you actually work with, and maybe we're not giving you the right information.
For example, this Urban Transition Alliance, there is now through these video conferences, a 21 challenge support cycle. And there are different cities like, for example, Yuhua in China, and there is a support cycle which is called City Business Collaboration to Unlock Sustainable Investments. We have another one in Scotland with Glasgow, which is called Social Inclusion and Recovery of derelict sites through urban food models. Then we have one with the city of Essen. It is close to Dortmund, leveraging climate action through cross-sectoral financing. We have another one with Gelsenkirchen, which is also here in the Ruhr area, which is called engaging with local business to combat climate change. And so on. We have a lot of ones: climate urgency response, piloting, interdepartmental collaboration for integrated city action, and so on and so on. It's a lot of things are on the way, and we discuss a lot, and we also get ideas. But for me, it's also important not to have only the international network action with countries like they are on the same industrial level like us. We also have to be in networking, for example, with Africa. And so we have a climate partner network, for example, with Kumasi in Ghana, just to exchange and to show our community or our citizens what happens in Africa, and also to transform action programs to Africa, or give them some examples what they can do in terms of climate adaptation, for example, or in terms of infrastructure, things like this. Yeah.
Mr. Gutowski, was that your question?
Yeah, more roughly. I'd like to know just where people get their information. That networking obviously has been very important, and that's very useful for me to understand.
I can answer for the Fridays for Future side. Like we do watch the IPCC reports, kind of. We usually don't fully read them, and also like look over the conclusions, and often just listen, like just reading the sightings of trusted newspapers. So that's at least like a base for our research. And usually from there on, we still like keep to, we stay at this trusted newspapers, kind of, because otherwise, like if you would read journals over and over, it's just too much work for some voluntary engagement. So, but I'm kind of the wrong person to ask, because as a scientist, I'm kind of also usually trying to get like the relevant papers for it. But usually we stick to mainstream news, kind of.
Now I would like to come to a second round. What are, in your opinion, the main reasons for the reluctance in certain parts of politics, but also in certain parts of the population of the people? Is it just the lifestyle they want to defend? Is it lobby interest? And if we analyze what the reasons are, we might be able to find out ways to overcome it. I don't know who wants to start. Maybe we start in America again, or you want to?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, go ahead.
I think part of it sometimes I would point to climate scientists not really understanding how to communicate. I think that we used to think that because we were making our pronouncements from what you would call the ivory tower, from our lofty position in the university, that people were just going to accept everything we said. And we didn't really understand the values, the motivations that people have for how they go about their lives. I think about where I live in Iowa, where there's a lot of farmers. Farmers get tired of everybody telling them how to run their farm. And so where success has occurred is when we've actually interacted directly with the farmers and understood what it means to be a farmer, what kinds of questions they have to answer on a day-by-day basis to do their work, and how our work could be relevant to what they are trying to do. And I think that gets at another aspect of this that's been very hard for people in academia to understand, is you have to listen. We're so used to just talking and making pronouncements. And it's a lot, we're not trained to listen to other people, but I think that's a very important part of this. What some of my colleagues have started calling co-production of climate information, where we work together with people who are going to use the climate information. And I think that that's one aspect of it. I'm sure there are many other aspects, but just that whole notion that somehow we know everything and people are just going to do exactly as we say has unfortunately been part of the initial statements that people have sometimes made.
Maybe we go to Germany now, Mr. Leichner. You have an explanation?
Yeah, it's a difficult field, you know. Some days ago, I had a video conference with my friends, with my old friends from Karlsruhe, where I'm born, and we often talk together. And Europe at the moment is burning. You see Greece, you see Spain, you see Italy. You have these floodings everywhere and things like this, you know, the heat waves and so on. And now it's in the mind of the people now. In the mind of these people, they understand a little bit the functioning of climate change because they have a good education and they have studied and things like this. Now I feel that there is a sort of phlegmatic. You understand this phlegmatic? Yeah, and to say, what can we do now? It's offshore. They say it's offshore that at the end of the century we will have more than 2 degrees change, or maybe 3 or 4 degrees. So what worse is it now to do anything, you know? And this is very difficult now to bring the people back in this science thing to say, come on, if we do it now, right now at the moment, if we start right now at the moment, if we change everything, if we change the economy, if we change the mobility, if we change your life, you must change it. Everybody must change his life. And then we have a chance to get it. Otherwise, it's really very difficult. That's what I can tell them. But this is what I have a response now from people I know very well. And it makes me also a little bit sad, of course, because I think there is a chance, you know, but it's not, the window is not open very long to do so.
So not only the scientists, but also the politicians have also to convince more actively the population and to have a dialogue to change the mind, the attitudes.
Yeah, Gerald, I'd like to. That's a good point. I think maybe it's typical in the States that, you know, you need a corporate sponsor for some sort of course of action. I don't know. Am I overshooting on this? Anybody? You know. So again, back to the lobbying. Where do you get the funds to do these things? Where do you? Wie bitte? Sorry.
Elon Musk. He wants to sell his Tesla.
Good luck.
Yeah, sorry, it was a joke. Yeah, but maybe the American colleagues have an idea. Maybe Dale can contribute something. Eh?
Well, I have the privilege of working in a region that believes in the science of climate, and a group of elected officials that's doing their best to acting on the advice of that science. There's been a paradigm shift in Virginia 3 years ago. Our governor declared that we would be climate neutral by 2050, and there's now tinkering with those plans. Virginia also is among one of the most vulnerable states in the United States to sea level rise. Events are going to start driving a change in opinion, I believe, I hope, maybe not naively. And I think that the question then will be how the forest fires of the West and the intense flooding that we have been experiencing also here in the East. Look to Tennessee. That was a scale equivalent to the R Valley a couple of weeks ago. Just last Saturday here in Alexandria, we had another, I think, 250-year storm. We had 7 centimeters of rain in 30 minutes. Put that into perspective. And so events hopefully will start to drive a change. When it comes down to this very specific conversation that pulls us together right now at this very moment, Germans talking to Americans, science, local level, how it all comes together, I think, again, I'll put on my American, I'll share with you where I think these kinds of conversations are so relevant is we need as Americans to not only be driven by the events that are affecting us, unfortunately negatively, but then also listen to people that have been doing this very well and better, frankly. However critical you Germans want to be of your work and your progress, when it comes to apples benchmarks on renewable energy or applications of energy efficient housing standards, you're ahead. And so we need to learn. Where it's kind of exciting, I think I know where the conversation is going is how do you address some of the issues in other parts of the United States, perhaps where climate change isn't taken as seriously as here. And there's a little anecdote that I'll just share with you, which is, about 30 years ago, needle exchange programs for opiates and heroin were government-supported needle exchange programs, I think started in cities like Hamburg and Amsterdam and Rotterdam, if I'm not mistaken. And just recently, I was seeing how government-supported needle exchange programs were being adopted in rural West Virginia. And I thought, wow, that's kind of funny. Something that started in, I think, what would be considered politically about as liberal as you could imagine, is now in something about politically opposite. And so that's a long-winded way of saying, I think when we highlight the benefits of action, the demonstrations, the effects of what you are doing in Dortmund and other cities in Germany, also in Europe, and figure out a way, as Dr. Kutowski said, of making the science intelligible, that information translatable and understandable to local elected officials and their practitioners and staffs. That's sort of a winning formula.
Okay, I saw, I would like to open also our discussion to participants. I saw a question from Buffalo, then.
Where did you see that question, sir?
In the chat.
It was me.
Ah, yes, okay, that's Davon. Yeah, how you doing, Davon?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you again.
Thank you for having me. I've always enjoyed these sessions. In the third session, I've enjoyed them quite a bit. So my question is kind of relatable to the local sense of climate change. So what I do at Open Buffalo, I'm a youth organizer here, so I oversee and support our youth action team, the young people from like 14 to 24. But as a whole, the organization does focus on breaking systems of oppression through the lenses of race, economics, and ecological justice. So specifically on the ecological justice part, how would all of the experts here about climate change kind of I guess, define the effects of climate change towards, I guess, the more marginalized and less fortunate neighborhoods? And then how would you suggest we go about it at the local level of kind of raising awareness and decreasing the oppressive effect on those communities? Sorry, it's a long question.
Yeah. So
Okay, maybe I can say something for Dortmund in this context. It's of course very difficult to get the society into measures for climate protection. The most carbon savings in Dortmund we can do when we make the houses or when we renovate the houses energy efficient, you know. But there is no need for owner of houses to make this because it costs more money. So our thinking is now, and this is much more better than before, that we have to give them subsidies. We just tried it with green roofs, for example, and we have now a subsidy program for green roofs. And immediately we had a lot of Anträge, applications to do this, you know. And the same thing is the communities and the governments must give money out for things like this, and then the people start to think about, okay, when I renovate my house, then I will do it in an efficient way, you know. And this is one thing what we can reach the civil society to be part of this, you know. The other way, of course, is that more and more people affected by climate change, but not enough that so many change their life that is enough for savings, you know. Because of course it's a social problem. People, they have money, they can buy photovoltaic for the roof and things like this and make the house efficient, and people have no money. That is very difficult. The old lady with a little pension maybe lives in the 5th floor under the roof. There is no protection for the sun or things like this, you know, and this is very difficult. Yeah.
Is incentive the right way also in America? Because as far as I have understood, Biden and Kerry, or the new American administration, try also to invest in a huge program which has not passed yet the Congress, but which includes also such incentives, doesn't it? Maybe Professor Gutowski knows it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so much of what happens in America is driven by business, and incentives certainly help. If businesses see that there's a way of making a profit, it helps. As an example, there have been incentives in the past to support the development of wind energy. And in my home state of Iowa right now, because of that, wind energy has grown substantially. And the amount of electricity produced by wind is over 50% of the amount of electricity that people in the state consume. So incentives certainly help a lot. And I think people have to be maybe made to understand that these incentives are part of an investment, that it's not simply throwing money out there so some people can make a lot of money, but that there's actually a problem that people are trying to address. And so those incentives help. I'd like to just say one thing to Devon in response to his question. As you may be aware of, there's a growing awareness in the scientific community about the whole issue of environmental justice. Even within the Department of Energy, the program managers who fund my research have been raising that question recently. Now, we're not social scientists, but clearly we can provide a lot of information about where heat waves go, how different parts of urban areas are affected more by rising temperatures, or places are more vulnerable to flooding or sea level rise. And so there certainly is a lot of research that needs to be done so that trying to address those problems of economic disparity, environmental justice really have the right foundation to them, and so that people understand that we are truly addressing a problem. And again, incentives, ultimately, when we identify the problem, incentives will certainly play a role in giving people motivation to, what I would say, do the right thing.
Dr. Gutowski, you brought up a point about working with the social scientist community. Now, I am not experienced in how siloed these scientific communities are. Is it difficult to connect with other communities, scientific communities, to kind of move forward with initiatives?
I think it's becoming less and less siloed. As you say, people understand that the really hard problems that we have to address, and if you want to work on hard problems, then those problems cut across multiple disciplines and we have to interact. You know, when I was a young scientist, physical scientists like in my community would kind of look down on social scientists as doing soft science, as they would call it. But we've come to understand that it's actually a lot harder. It's a lot harder because as a physical scientist, I know the physical world obeys certain laws of motion, certain physical laws, whereas people are just all over the place. It's much harder. But we've come to understand that we really need to work together. If I want to be able to have the climate work I do become effective, I have to learn how you interact really productively with communities. And that's what the social scientists really know far better than I do. And so I've seen that happening. I've seen things like what Dale has been talking about tending to happen more, but there's still a lot to learn.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you. Marlon, did you want to comment?
Yeah.
Yes, I do wanted to comment. I think that's true, and at least at my work, we do cooperate with, not internationally, but with a lot of different research fields. But coming back to the first question is, I think it's like the climate change is broaden the inequality gap, and that's also already shown by scientists. And therefore, and it comes hand in hand with that to engage personally against climate change, you need to be kind of well suited. So if you're like always worrying about the next rent you have to pay, you don't have that much time to think about sustainable action. Therefore, I think both go hand in hand, and you do have to kind of decrease the gap between the rich and the poor so that everyone can engage in climate action. And for example, incentives can help for that regard, but also someone has to pay for these incentives, and therefore it's got to be taxed somewhere. So I would probably say that we have like an enormous gap that is widening. So you have to go into this direction to kind of pay for climate change adaptation and so on.
I have a final question to you.
Can I just
wanted
chime
to
in
comment
something?
there?
I just wanted to say, to address Devin's question, because it's so important. And it's something that there's a nice constellation that's starting to come together over the last 3-4 years, especially in the context of our climate resiliency work. And that is mapping, collecting more data, understanding better the modeling that goes into the understanding of communities that have been marginalized, communities of color that are suffering the most of the flooding, the sad legacy, unfortunately, in the United States of redlining, of discrimination, and then coming up with appropriate local level, regional level climate resiliency plans. The urban heat island is a classic example. The marginalized communities of color have suffered to this day the most from the negative effects of the heat. There's the largest, most portions of urban areas in regions of Virginia.
Yeah, I'm almost done with this teleconference.
The most impermeable, they have the largest areas of pavement.
No, it's dangerous.
I just want to close with a nice story with which we're working it has not so much to do with climate resiliency, but extends to it. And that is, we're working with the Virginia Tech School of Design and Landscape Architecture to interpret certain sections of Alexandria by drawing lessons of how the Holocaust was interpreted in Germany. And it builds on the back of Brian Stevenson's Equal Justice Initiative, the lessons that he drew from the Holocaust Memorial, the tripping stones that he incorporated. And so as Alexandria takes receipt of the columns from the National Memorial, we're looking for ways in which we interpret not only the emplacement of the columns, representing the sad legacy of lynchings and racial injustice, but there are other sites in the cities, like auction houses, slave jails, African-American heritage parks. All this comes together that we realize needs to be interpreted. I'll just close by saying that a piece of geography of Alexandria, Virginia, Duke Street, is subject to the 1619 project. And this is the focus of this workshop that we're going to be doing next spring with German counterparts. This is where all of this comes together. And we're going to be looking to ideas in which not only the lessons of the German interpretation of public space come together, but the African-American Heritage Park is the site right now of this large discharge of raw untreated sewage that the city is working to correct. It's the largest infrastructure project, I think, in the city's history. And so as the city works to correct the discharges of the flow of the untreated, polluted combined sewer overflow, there's a chance to promote some more interpretation of this healing story. And so this is where all these things come together in a really nice way. But you're right, we're just scratching the surface of our own history. It's a huge problem and we need to pay closer attention to it. And the example that I tried to just share with you, however long-worded and winded, I think represents again an example of how this conversation comes together with our German counterparts. And
Dale, sorry if I interrupt you. I think we should have an own dialogue later. We have a series of wunderbar discussions, and this is worthwhile social and racial injustice and etc. to discuss it separately another time. But I've learned now that environmental protection and social topics is close together, and we need an alliance of all the different groups. Finally, because I look at my watch and I know that we have about 1 hour and later on the Zoom conference comes to an end soon, because Fridays for Future has a high reputation among all the participants of this discussion, I would finally ask Marlon Philipp if we have forgotten any important aspect or any important question in our discussion, which we can then maybe quickly in the last round still consider.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we already kind of discussed, which is the social justice, social inequality part. But I usually say 1 or 2 sentences which everyone can cope with, and which is kind of uniting people from different fields. And that basically is that it is important that you do understand that sustainable behavior is usually always an extra mile. It's more work than just doing the regular thing. And that goes for everyone. It belongs to the person who rides his bicycle for the first time instead of riding a car, but it also goes with the manager who has to start a new sustainable way of doing the regular business. And it's always an extra mile, and it's important for everyone to know and to try to achieve it by themselves, to act sustainable, even though it's this extra mile. And this is what I usually try to get the people to realize, that in your private area, but also in your work field, it's always important to just do one step more.
Thank you, Manon. Gerald, I don't want to keep participants longer. We're already about 5 minutes over. I know people have busy days. I'll stay on for another 10 minutes. Otherwise, you know, if you have to go, you're welcome to go, or we can keep the conversation going. I would like to, though, at this time, thank everybody for participating and your input. There are 1,000 ideas running around in my head at this time. But Gerard, where are you at?
Yeah, well, I can also thank all the participants. I think it was a fruitful discussion, because what I've learned is that in America and in Germany or in Europe, we have meanwhile similar ideas and a similar approach to fight the climate change. We all had examples of bad examples of floodings or heat waves, etc., or Buffalo, maybe also blizzards, I don't know. Yeah, so that it is urgent, is an urgent call to reflect and to act. And I was glad to hear that Dortmund, Mr. Leichner, is a city of master plans, and we hope that the master plans become something like master action too, in the end, with the people participating in it.
I'll do my very best.
Yeah. Thanks to all of you for the time you spent together, and I hope it was also fruitful for all of you.
Yes, again, the recording is available. Email me if you'd like to connect with anybody. I will send, of course, the recording to those on the American side. If anybody from Germany would be interested in receiving, please let me know. And we really appreciate it. We wish you a very good rest of the week and a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you so
invitation.
much.
And auf
I
Wiedersehen.
love KVB. Marco Reus is one of my favorite players of all time.
Yeah, sorry, at the time being, I saw all the time actual news, breaking news from Kabul, which doesn't look good.
No, it looks awful.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so
Dankeschön.
much.